Last week, we started talking about, because we've been talking for weeks now about the qualifications and expectations from elders or for elders. Last week, we turned the viewpoint and we began talking about what God expects from the flock, from the followers. We finished most of that discussion. There's a couple of main points, and then I have something else for us to move on to, something related. So just to review quickly what we said last week, the followers must not murmur against leaders. We pointed out some Old Testament examples of people that were punished for murmuring against various leaders, and it creates an unstable atmosphere in the church when people do that. Followers must not be insubordinate or disrespectful. You may and probably will from time to time disagree with some decision made by the elders, and that's okay. You're allowed to disagree, but you need to be respectful in your disagreement, and again, submit yourself if they maintain the decision that they made. God expects his leaders to be corrected when they sin. We are not saying it in any way that elders should be allowed to wander off into sin and continue in sin, but the scriptures tell us a very precise path to walk when we're going to question an elder. It is a little bit different than just if you and I had a disagreement, because as we pointed out, if you and I have a disagreement, that's unpleasant, but it's not very likely to shake up the whole congregation if it happened. Now, I'm not saying it never would, because as soon as I said that, someone would point out sometime that it did, but it's unlikely that a disagreement between two members would do that. But bringing charges against the eldership, you're threatening the whole leadership of the church, so it's more serious. Okay, any thoughts during the week that you wanted to make about any of those points? Okay, as I mentioned at the end of the lesson, we'll move to a little bit more positive aspect of this conversation, and that is that followers must offer positive encouragement and support. In 1 Thessalonians 5, Paul wrote, "We ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves." And that word ask there, when we use that word ask in English, there's an implied ability on your part to make a decision as to whether you will or won't, right? You have the option to say yes or no. The way this word worked in Greek, and especially considering that an apostle and an inspired writer is using it, there's a little more force to it than what we associate with it in English. And some of the various translations kind of showed that difference. Some translations say implore, some say entreat with either spelling there, some say urge. The King James says beseech, request, beg, or appeal to you. It's mostly used to describe a question that is a challenge, like God used that early in Genesis after Adam and Eve had sinned. He asked Adam, "Who told you that you were naked?" All right? And that's the same approach with that word that God used there. And basically, it's made by someone of a higher, at least perceived authority or social rank than to someone of a lower. So back then, it would be a word that might show a boss asking an employee to do something. They're asking, but when your boss, those of you that still have bosses, when your boss asks you to do something, is he really asking you to do something? No. He might be being polite, but it's really just a polite command to do whatever the thing is. So that's really what Paul is saying here. He's not saying if you feel like it or if it occurs to you, encourage the elders. He's saying encourage the elders. Okay? Any thoughts on that? Okay. So, encouragement comes in a variety of forms. Before I show you, to stimulate a little participation here, before I show you what I put on my list, what might you think? What are some ways we can encourage the leadership?
Words of encouragement.
Somebody said something.
Words of encouragement.
Do it.
Words of encouragement.
Okay. Speak the words. Attaboy. Attaboy. Right? Thank you. Attaboys are good. Yeah, what else?
Do what they ask you.
Do what they ask, right? Do what they ask.
Pray for them.
Pray
for them.
Pray for them.
I think showing up, just showing up for them.
Okay. Don't make their job hard.
Supporting, exactly, and always.
Okay. Even if it's something that you might not have, it's like, really? We have to have a gospel meeting this week when I've got all the, right? Okay. Anything else? All right. And all of those parallels, some things I have here. This is a big one. A willingness to serve when asked without grumbling. Right? If they ask you to teach a Bible class, teach the Bible class. Right? If they ask you to, I don't know what, but, do it without complaining. And again, remember, we said this last week. Now, this is going to be an ask, right? Because the scriptures do say for the elders not to lord it over the congregation. So they really have no authority than their example and the position that God put them in. They don't have Bruno waiting in the wings to come rough you up a little bit if you don't do what they ask you to do.
That's my job.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, serve without complaining. Okay. Volunteering. I think someone said that. Volunteer to provide some service without being asked. Okay. Whatever might come. Like the meal train thing comes up every once in a while when someone's in need. Do you have to wait for the meal train to be officially released and approved before you say, okay? So, and this was a prayer, a note of encouragement, or the attaboy, right? A verbalized word of appreciation. Who does not like to be encouraged? Raise your hand. Anybody? I only know one person that would say that they wouldn't, but they're just being difficult, I think. Okay? So everybody likes to be noticed and encouraged, right? And no different. And here's why it's so important for the elders, okay? They're not serving for the praise that they're going to get, because that's not going to be enough. Because truth be told, they probably don't get as much as they should. Okay? So, we need to be sure that we're showing our appreciation for what they do. Any other thoughts or anything about that? Okay, so, but it is, we all like it. It's invigorating, it's energizing when someone acknowledges their efforts and the benefits that come from them.
You know, they're not just serving a role, it's not just a job. It's like they're supporting the congregation.
Right.
So we're relying on them in a way that there is no thanking. So if
Right.
we can just be there or just understand that it's a big burden.
Yeah. You're right. It's not a role. It's a lifestyle, right, that they are living. It reminds me of my friend in Zimbabwe, Farai Chingande. He often writes about his work there and the villages that he goes to visit. And out of courtesy, and really kind of out of mandate too, but it's kind of a balance, he has to call on the tribal chief for that village, just sort of for permission to evangelize in that village. And that tribal chief is a lifestyle, right, that person lives in. So
I think also putting yourself under their authority and them knowing it. It's like Brent and I have always done it. When we were going to get married, we went to the elders first. We asked to see the elders and have a conference. And also when we join a congregation, talk to the elders first or have them over or something,
Yeah.
To find out more about.
And that's kind of a two-way street,
Yeah.
right? You're checking each other out that way.
Exactly. But then we're under.
Right, right.
We put ourselves under their authority.
Right.
And so they're free to and expected to.
The elders at the congregation where Lisa grew up did the same when she and I got engaged, right? They just checked in with her, and they didn't exactly grill me, but I had several of them kind of make their feelings known about how much they thought about her and cared about her. So I better get it right, sort of a thing.
Nancy's sister just wanted to be known with the congregation. She just moved there. They gave her an 8-page thing to fill out. And she said it's just normal stuff that you do, and you will participate in the potlucks. You will do this. You will do that. She said it was ridiculous. 8 pages.
I think I'd keep looking in that case.
Well, if there's lots of potlucks, that might.
I got something from the Census Bureau like 2 months ago. You've been lucky citizen. You've been chosen to some kind of survey. I was going to throw it in the trash, but it said you are required by law. Man. So I went online and looked it up and said nobody's ever been put in jail for not doing it. But I was going to ignore it, and then they kept sending me reminders, and every one of them said, you are required by law. I finally just bit the bullet and did it. But all right, so encourage. We can all do with that. And finally, in this train of thought, we as the followers must make good choices in the leaders. All right? I hope that this process that we're going through has been helpful rather than laborious, because the first point, we often end up with the leaders we deserve. No slant against Brady. But you can see the parallels to voting, right? If you don't like the person that won whatever office you went, or you didn't go to vote for, really, that's on you if you didn't do your part, right? We as the followers have to be engaged in our part, or we will have no voice, and we won't have a right to complain. Okay? If our standards are low, then we will end up with poor leadership. Okay? And I think while it's sinful to depose a qualified and capable leader, it is also true that it's difficult to challenge someone who's an elder if, in fact, he has demonstrated an inability to lead. Okay? Because of the things we've looked at, once you've asked someone to serve, it's not just like marriage has become in the United States these days, just tossed to the side. Okay? It's more serious than that. Thinking along those lines, though, our standards for leadership cannot be higher than God's. We cannot be more restrictive than God and end up rejecting people who would be a competent leader, okay? Just like the theme of the sermon last Sunday, we have to stay in the lines that God has put there, okay? But on the same time, on the other hand, they cannot be lower than God's and give unspiritual men a chance to rule over God's people. Any thoughts on it? Nope. Okay. So, please, I know maybe this has become somewhat tedious. We are almost finished. Okay. But when we get to the actual process, whatever that process looks like, do your part and participate. Prayerfully consider everything that we've studied. Go back in the scriptures again. Refamiliarize yourself again with what God's word says about this. Okay? So that you can make the best possible choice that you can. So, a couple of questions. Hebrews 13:17 asks us not to bring grief. How can someone's life bring grief to the elders? We've mentioned a few.
Not doing what they asked you to do.
Okay. Not doing what they ask you to do.
Living a lifestyle that they can't really accept
Okay.
because it's not scriptural.
Okay. That lady that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago from Oklahoma, did she bring grief to the elders? Yeah. in a huge way, right? In a huge way. Probably ulcers and all kind of stuff to them. All right. Any other ideas?
I think the bigger, I can't remember if it's Hebrews 13, but one of the Hebrews passages talks about that they are someone who must give an account before God of those under their care. And so there's a weighty concern that they have to their boss as to how the flock is behaving. So if you've got that one goofy sheep that's constantly causing them to leave the 90 and 9 to go chase after the one, that's giving them some grief.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. So then, what change or changes can you make to make the elder's job easier? That's pretty much a personal reflection for you. Okay. I'll tell you one thing we can all do. We've got to be approachable, right? If Phil or Brady have a concern and they come to us, human beings' first reaction is to get their backs up, right? Right? We start off from a position of rejecting, right? Put up walls right away, rather than looking for the truth in what they're saying, right? James describes the word as a what? A mirror, right? And we all need mirrors instead of brick walls.
Dad, I had a question about putting some of this stuff together,
Okay.
including your sermon from a week or two ago. I was thinking about,
It's not a hard question, is it?
well, I don't know. It's a little bit hard to answer because we're talking about men who are also apostles. But in Galatians 2, when Paul's upset with Peter's hypocrisy, he doesn't seem to follow the Matthew pattern. He straight away says, opposes him to his face in the presence of Paul. And I was wondering what you thought about that.
One of the things, this Bible that I use, it's called the Defending the Faith Study Bible. from Apologetics Press. It's put together by members of the church. That business is owned by members of the church, correct? Okay, so everything in it, and it's got a ton of study guides. Everything in it is written. You know, sometimes if you go to a Barnes and Noble or something and get a study Bible from there, you're not quite sure what the influence is on all those study things that are included. That's why I was eager to buy this one, because I know that members of the church not only put together the words of the Bible, but wrote the study guides. One of the things that they focus on is alleged contradictions in the scriptures. And one of the things they say, pretty much I think in every one of those that I've read, one of the things that they say is that we're not necessarily reading, the whole story is not necessarily written there, okay? And the scriptures say that themselves, don't they, right? And then not everything could, how large would the Bible be, right? If they addressed every single word that was uttered for Jesus's, well, you know, all the way up to the time of John when he was on, you know, the Bible would be impossibly huge if every single thing they ever said in every circumstance was recorded, or everything they did. So that's the immediate thing that comes to mind, is what kind of exchange might have happened between them that's not recorded. Plus also what you led with, they were apostles, right? Only 10 other guys were on their level, or 9 other guys, I guess, by that point. Right? Only 9 other guys were on their level. Plus, because they were apostles, it's sort of like Ananias and Sapphira, and they were struck dead just for lying, right? Just for lying. And we see people in the scriptures that did far worse, in our opinion, far worse things than lying. But one of the things I like to think about when I think about Ananias and Sapphira and why their punishment was so harsh, I mean, that was right at the beginning when the church was getting on its feet, right? And wanted to make sure that they were, in fact, getting on their feet, and that some sort of problem was not allowed to thrive and grow. Perhaps a similar thing running through Paul's mind. I've got to do a Barney Fife here and nip it, right? You got to cut it off no matter what. Those are my speculations. Anybody have any other ones?
No, I think that it depends on the situation. A lot of times, you gotta know your audience, basically. And I think it was just like when Jesus went in and saw all the merchants, you know, get them out. You know, that's, you could say, well, that was a bit violent for some, you know, and it's like, yeah, but the situation dictated it at the time. And I think that dictated a quick rebuke. And if you see, obviously Peter was already starting to feel bad about it, because he immediately, you know, I think Paul knew that he had to be there, basically.
And that's a good thought. And it led me to think of Apollos. Apollos was knowledgeable. He was sincere. He was apparently good at what he did. He just didn't have all the facts. Did Aquila and Priscilla jump him there in front of everybody? No, they took him aside later. So I think there's some good truth to what you say. Again, I wouldn't say never, but I can't really imagine a situation of jumping up in front of the congregation and, you know, shouting someone down, or so to speak. Because you have to balance the harm against the one kind of harm, I guess, against another kind of harm is what that would amount to. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Carol?
You have to
realize too that this provides a very real example to the congregation that nobody is above discipline.
Okay.
Here are two apostles, and you've got to toe the line. Doesn't matter who you are.
Okay. Right. Nobody's above the law.
And the thought I had about it was just simply that, you have a prescribed process that Jesus has given you, and then you have an example that, at least in first blush, doesn't look like it follows it. That doesn't excuse you because of the one deviancy to then ignore the teaching of Jesus on how to solve something. You don't get to say, "No, I'm going with Paul in this one." All right, so
Okay.
in front of everybody, here we go.
And one of the points that we're going to make in what I'm about to start here is we're going to start talking about effective communication from congregation to elders and elders to congregation, both ways. And one of the things that we in the flock have to remember is we will not have all the information, right? And we've all experienced that in our jobs, right? If our boss tells us something that seems weird or sort of out of sorts, we don't necessarily have all the information that went into it, making that request of us. So what was I going to say? It was good. Maybe it'll come back to me.
If I could just show an example.
Sure.
If I got up at the pulpit and started saying, during the service, started saying, "You don't have to be baptized. This is all great," I would expect somebody to come and remove me. Because that's a grievous, and you all know I know better type thing. And I think that was, with the same with Paul. Whereas if I just went up and made a mistake, and like I sent that email, I said Zacchaeus instead of Zechariah.
Or you said unleavened bread when you meant leavened bread. Right? Right. That's good too. As somebody I guess every situation is going to be a little bit different. Wanda?
Sometimes elders make decisions based on the whole story.
Right.
That doesn't mean we have to know the whole story.
That's right. Did I see?
Well, I was on a jury one time, and we were given specific information, and we acquitted. Well, I went to lunch afterward, and there were people sitting there that were on the other side, and they said, "Well, they didn't know this," and we weren't given that information. That wasn't our responsibility. If the judge knew it, and you don't have to know everything. That's up to them.
Right. Cheryl?
Scott, I was involved in a class one time, and the speaker during the entire class drilled all the folks in there about what they needed to wear on Sunday to worship God. Their very best. And their suit and their tie and all this. Well, you can tell I took that seriously because of my eloquent dress, but I didn't say anything. And he talked about it pretty well the whole time. And a lot of occasions, if someone doesn't speak up, that group will never be gathered together again. It was a pretty large assembly that day. And I just think, I don't know whether, it just seems to me that I should have spoke up. I'm not an elder, never have been. And I don't consider myself anywhere near perfect, but I wish I had spoken up that one time, because I felt like asking, well, do you also need to drive the best vehicle you have, or go out and buy a new one when you come to worship to make sure? I don't know what to make sure of, but I didn't see anything good coming from that, but I never spoke up, and I regretted it pretty well ever since.
But putting together what everyone has said, and there is definitely not a one-size-fits-all in a situation.
Jesus rebuked to the Pharisees and all that was an immediate response in a lot of things they did. It told them, you know, and it didn't wait to, he didn't beat around the bush telling them some of those things that they were doing that were not in order.
But if we remember what Jeremy just said a few minutes ago, if we do our best to follow what Jesus gave us, we probably won't go wrong.
There also may be a difference. It's worth delineating that one is talking about matters of transgression between people. Another one's talking about
Matters of faith.
And doctrine. And that's not really the same thing exactly. I still think that I've seen people, unfortunately, get kind of crushed over very minor missteps or even perceived missteps.
Right.
That wasn't good. But you obviously, like in Brent's example, don't want to allow some bizarre, you know, transgressive teaching to be publicly taking place without comment or, you know.
We had one situation when we lived in Berlin, and Brent and Terry have experience with military congregations. You take what you get, right? And we didn't have a preacher. We just took turns, and one young man got up he took a turn one Sunday, and it was at the end of his lesson during what we call the invitation. And he went through everything, but he left off baptism at the end, right? I forget exactly what he said to end the lesson, but I clearly remember him not mentioning baptism. So our approach was just a couple of us pulled him aside and revisited those things with him rather than calling him down, you know, and everybody that was there was a regular member. They knew better than what he said. Go ahead.
Did you give an example of somebody that verged into some very scary territory in a prayer, calling down?
Yes, and he was called down right then, which was also very disturbing. But anyway, all right, so let's talk about, we have a few minutes, effective communication. Okay, let's talk about the breakdown of communication first and how we can avoid it. A good definition, I thought, for communication was the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information as by speech, by signals, by writing, or behavior. Gentlemen, how often has your wife spoken volumes to you without saying a word? Right? You could just tell by that stance, that look, right? You just got fussed out big time without a word ever being spoken, right? So there's all kind of ways to communicate. So what is a common complaint in marriages, in the workplace, and in a church? Not listening or not communicating, not talking, right? You've probably heard, I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I'm sure you've all heard something similar to them where, you know, a guy uses like 10,000 words in the course of a day. A woman uses something like 50,000 words in the course of a day. So at the end of the day, the guy's done, right? But the woman still has 40,000 words to go. So, all right. You know, and we've all been through this. I just went to the audiologist again on Friday. You know, Lisa said, well, how'd it go? And I said, it was fine. She wanted a little more than that. So, but the lack of meaningful communication, right? That's probably a number one, maybe right below. Well, actually, they're kind of tied together, right below finances, but really finances and good communication in a marriage go together. So, knowing that, how would you define meaningful communication? it went fine was not meaningful communication to Elisa, right? It was not meaningful. So how would you define meaningful communication? Let's hear from the ladies in particular, because this is really y'all's area.
Well, women have no problem communicating with each other, so.
Oh, I know. It's blown my mind forever how y'all have to go to the bathroom together so you can keep talking and stuff. Yeah. When guys go to the bathroom, it's like the lesser said, the better, right? Okay. So women are definitely the better communicators.
I think it goes back to what Terry was saying, like, we expect just to be listened to. You know, we want you to listen to us, we want you to hear us, and
Acknowledge.
acknowledge and
Acknowledge.
respond. Exactly, I was gonna say respond in kind, you know, to that. And that's
So you want more than a yes, dear.
absolutely
Okay.
more than
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Anything else?
I think meaningful communication requires an alignment of expectations. Because sometimes we do just want to be listened to, but sometimes it's, no, I need you to fix this. And so I think there needs to be the communication of those expectations. What am I expecting to get out of this communication? What are you expecting to get out of this communication? And so I think it takes that alignment to be meaningful.
Right.
I think you're right, because sometimes it's just the opposite. I want a sounding board. I don't want you to fix this.
Yeah, just say,
Because I know he's thinking, well, if I fix it, then you'll
See?
shut up, you know.
That's the thing we can't get right,
We
though.
can group
We don't
up.
know when we're supposed to fix it and when we're not supposed to.
Yes, Scott,
Okay.
but that's one of the things that, in speaking about meaningful communication, that I have learned about the people in my life, that I will start with, there are certain people in my life that I have for different things, right? And I will start with them and say, I don't want you to fix this, I just want you to listen. I want you to hear me out. And because I have a lot of fixers in my life and a lot of people that want to solve problems and defend me and take up for me and all of that. And so I start out the conversation like that. And I have been told in kind that is amazing for them, because that's a different part of the brain that they have to use if they just want to listen, as opposed to they want to act on things.
And that's meaningful to tell us at the beginning that we don't have to fix anything. We just need to listen. And that's helpful because naturally we're going to steer this into the church. If a member needs to talk to an elder, let the elder know up front. Is this something you need to fix, or you just need to listen to me? Let me give you an example from history of meaningful communication. And I just read it. So on July 26 of 1945, the Allies issued something called the Potsdam Declaration. They demanded Japan's unconditional surrender. The declaration warned of prompt and utter destruction if Japan refused. The Japanese government was internally divided on how to respond. Some leaders wanted to explore peace terms, while the military insisted on continuing to fight. On July 28th, 2 days later, the Japanese Prime Minister, Kentaro Suzuki, held a press conference, and he used the word mokusatsu as his answer. I lost my place. When he was addressing the Potsdam Declaration. Now, here's the thing about this word. In Japanese, mokusatsu can mean to ignore with silent contempt. In other words, a very strong rejection of the demand to surrender. Okay, but it can also mean withholding comment for now. In other words, a more neutral or delayed response. Here in the United States, we might have said, if the proclamation was coming the other way, we might have said, I need to think about it, right? Or something like that. Those are the two possible translations for that word, mokusatsu. Of course, the official Allied interpretation was that Japan had outright rejected the ultimatum, so that reinforced the U.S. decision to proceed with the atomic bombings on August 6th and August 9th of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, historians arguing from this side that they argue that Suzuki meant we are considering it but have no comment yet. And other historians believe the intent was indeed to reject the ultimatum because Japan's military still controlled a lot of the government. So, using an ambiguous word like that, I won't say it led to, but it certainly was a factor in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens. That was not meaningful communication, okay, on their part. So, avoid words like mokusatsu. Or, I guess our equivalent of that is when you ask your wife what's wrong and she says nothing. I mean, that's the word she speaks is nothing. That's our equivalent of mokusatsu, right? We got to figure out, okay, what does nothing mean in this case? So, if you're in a vacuum of information, like remember just not too long ago, right, the end of 2024, the drone thing, right? All these drones everywhere, all of a sudden. What did we want to know? What they were, where they came from, what they were doing, right? Were we told any of that? We were not, right? We were in a vacuum of information. So what did we start doing? Speculating, right? And rumors ran amok on what these drones possibly were. And that is where people often turn in a search for information. They will turn to the wrong source, the uninformed source, the rumor, the assumption, the speculation, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who saw something like this 50 years ago, right? And they run with it like it's gospel, okay? What does that do? Does that help in any way? It doesn't help. Now imagine that in the church. Sister so-and-so goes to sister other so-and-so and says, Brady said this to Sister Susie. Can you believe she has no clue what Brady said or why Brady said it or what the whole deal was, right? But it turns into the rumor mill and the speculation, right? And it's deadly in a organization like a congregation.
This is just another example. I don't know if it's on your list, but I think of what's the phrase you're looking for?
Meaningful communication.
It's also not meaningful if there's no intention to actually implement anything discussed. Like you can have people, you have meetings, this happens all the time at work and stuff like that, where you talk about the problem and blah, 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 blah. I mean, on and on endlessly, and then you even draft out plans and you make SMART goals and all the rest of it. Zero follow through and all of the communication was meaningless.
Or you deal with 6,000 what-if scenarios, right? Exactly. You're right. And that's, we will mention that at the end of this section. All right. We're out of time. We'll continue. We'll continue along this next time. So you have a little reprieve. Brady's eventually going to take over if I ever stop and let him. All right. Thank you.